Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 16 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half, and you can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. As I always say, when we're coming to do this pod off of a loss, I'm not quite as excited. So while it may not have been the prettiest win, and we'll get into that, but it is a win. There's no room for comments in the win-loss column. So we are recording this off of an Eagles win. So we'll get into that, and then we'll also be talking about probably a loss on Thursday. But we'll savor the the review instead of the preview.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a great and a little bit different show for you guys today. The Eagles are on the short week this week. And we were not going to have time to do our normal review show and then a normal preview show in advance of Thursday night. So today we're going to review the Eagles-Panthers game, preview the Eagles-Buccaneers game, and then Friday we're going to go live with kind of like the full Week 5 review, Week 6 preview. So a little bit different schedule this week, but we're going to get all of your games covered. So if you are not an Eagles fan, maybe you won't this one. That's up to you. But before we get to that, this podcast, it's going out live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook. So drop us a comment. Let us know what you guys want to talk about. Give us some thoughts. We'll feature them on the shows. We've already got Mr. Crockpot chiming in saying, hey, we want to interact with you guys. And also, this is going to go out on Apple Podcasts. So please follow, rate, review. But Mark, let's get into it. The Eagles they play the Panthers. Terrible first half, just abysmal, feeling really down at halftime, but they storm back in the second half. They walk away with the 21-18 win. Let's hop into it and talk takeaways. Where do you want to start with this game?
So it's just like the up and down nature of this team that we've talked about all year. And the week one, you look great. Week 2, you looked really good, but you didn't do enough to win. You key mistakes, and then obviously the Dallas massacre. And then Kansas City, you look great on offense, you look terrible on defense. And then this game, you saw both of them. You saw both extremes in this game, and you saw it with both sides of the ball. I mean, you saw the exact opposite in the first half of what Week 4 was in Week 5. It was a game where we couldn't get anything going offensively, and a game where our defense was stepping up and was making stops. And obviously, Darius Slay, we'll get into him. Everyone was making plays, and it was the complete opposite of the week before. So it's just, I have no idea what this team is. It's kind of impossible to have a clear, concise idea of what this team is. But I mean, it's just, this team's so up and down. I keep coming back to that, and you see it every game. You see it week to week, and it's why it's so hard to evaluate this team. It's why it's so hard to evaluate Sirianni. It's why it's so hard to evaluate Jalen Hurts. And we can try to do it as much as we can. But I think we're going to be changing our opinion a little bit week to week based on what we see, because you can't put your thumb on this team. You can't put this team in a corner. You can't say this is what this team's good at. This is what this team struggles with. Seems like it's almost a week to week thing.
Yeah, Mr. Crockpot chiming in, and he says, Miles Sanders is the fake noodle of the Eagles. He's an imposter. A little bit of a dad joke coming in there from our YouTube comments crowd. And yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Young quarterback, young head coach, first-time head coach, young defensive play caller, first-time defensive play caller. We're going to see ebbs and flows from this team, ups and downs. And ultimately, over the course of the season, we want to see general growth in the right direction. And it's too early to decide. I mean, we're 5 games into a 17-game season, but let's start with Miles Sanders, because that's been brought up here. I'm well on the record about Miles Sanders. I yelled at people on Twitter for whining about not running the ball against the Chiefs when our offense put up 3 points and never punted the ball. And I got clowned by a bunch of people that don't understand how football works. But Miles Sanders is just a guy. Like, in this game, he was routinely targeted out of the backfield. He had 5 receptions for 6 yards. Like, he was brought down by defensive ends, linebackers, and safeties in the open field. Notably, his last reception, he's one-on-one with a linebacker. Nobody else near him, and the linebacker takes him down. if you're going to be a good running back, you want to be involved, you've got to make the most of those opportunities. You add on top of that he ran out of bounds twice just trying to ice the game. Like, I've been watching football for a long time. I know that's a cardinal sin. I've never seen somebody do it twice in 3 plays.
Agreed. I've never seen it. He was a mental midget out there. I mean, that was unbelievable, that decision that he made to run out of bounds twice. And he's just a guy. I don't know how many times we have to say it or how many ways we have to say it. Every week he proves it. And every week I hear from Eagles fans about how he's still really good. And every week you see him projected for a certain amount of fantasy points. He is not a good running back, or not like a great running back by any stretch. And I was actually a little disappointed to see less work for Gainwell. I mean, Gainwell he had 3 targets on one catch on 3 targets, way less carries, 2 carries to Miles 11. And he had 16 yards on those 2 carries. I really would have liked to see Gainwell get more involved. And I think after those 2 plays at the end of the game, I think that that's definitely in play. I mean, we saw in week 4 that Gainwell was extremely involved when we were behind, and I could see that again with Tampa Bay. That's more for later on in the pod, but I would like to see more Gainwell and less Miles. And in this game, it seems like they really went in trying to make Miles a focal point of the game plan. And maybe that's based on some of the criticisms that Sirianni has heard and all of that. But it seems like that was a big focal point of what they were trying to do offensively, and it didn't work. Like you just said, I mean, 5 catches for 6 yards is just, I mean, that's a joke. That's just a waste of 5 pass attempts. It's a waste of 5 plays. And then 11 carries for 45 yards is nothing you'll write home about. So especially when you add in those 2 huge mental errors. And don't get it twisted. Like, that could have cost them the game. Like, that absolutely could have lost them the game. And you know, it's crazy that it almost did, but thankfully we were. I think Gainwell actually was the one who had the run that kind of iced it a little bit, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it took him down to 2nd inches or 2nd and 1 or something like that. But Gainwell had a big run after those Miles plays, and he almost went out of bounds, but stayed in bounds. And if that would have happened where another running back went out of bounds, I would have went nuts. But I remember noting that Gainwell came in after those 2 plays because clearly they put Miles on the bench.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting, you know, Gainwell's been such a focal point, and he really didn't get anything this game until Miles Sanders made those critical errors. And so, you know, I want to see Gainwell more involved. You know, if they want to split carries, that's fine. But I'm kind of out on Miles Sanders at this point in time.
I'm right there.
Another thing I'm out on is running rub routes in the red zone. Like, for the love of the football gods, somebody please learn how to run a rub route. Greg Ward gets the penalty that takes the touchdown off the board this time. And I've got no problem with that play call. I saw people saying, just let Smith get open. I mean, why not make it easier for him? But we have got to stop committing penalties. Our head coach has a wide receiver coach background. Like, how are NFL vets just unable to run that route? I don't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I always harp back to the wide receiver coach thing for Sirianni. I mean, we see Rager step out of bounds a couple weeks ago. We see Smith step out of bounds on a big play last week. We've seen this is the 3rd pick play we've been called on in I think as many weeks. So clearly something's not going right in the wide receivers room. Clearly something's not going right in the game plan when they're basically relying on pick plays. I know you said why not try to get him open. I don't think we should have to rely on pick plays, and maybe not just get Smith open. How about we do what we did a lot in the 4th quarter and in the red zone, primarily in the 4th quarter? Let's use Jalen Hurts' legs, especially when we get into the red zone. It's almost like if you have a mobile quarterback whose best attribute is improvisation and running, it's almost like you should let him do it. It's almost like you should let that be a part of your offense. And it seemed like they were fighting against that at times to start this year. And he only had 30 yards rushing, but at the end of the game, he was making some plays, and it seemed like they were doing more designed runs for Jalen Hurts. And that's something that they need to do to inject some life into this offense and into the running game.
Yeah, and he's up and down on the day. He ends with completing just under 60% of his passes. He had the 3rd lowest intended air yards in week 5, and despite that, completes less than 60% of his passes. He had a negative completion percentage above expectation. And so not a great day for Hurts. Hurts was really bad in the first half. He got a little better in the second half. Still not a good Hurts game, but What I come back to is
I would say he was terrible for 3 quarters.
Yeah. What I ultimately come back to, though, is what were our biggest complaints about Carson Wentz? It was taking unnecessary sacks and not taking care of the football. And Jalen Hurts, for his mistakes and for that horrific interception that he threw, he gets out of the pocket and he throws the ball away. He's not taking dumb sacks. He's not doing dumb things. Now, that wheel route that he overthrows for the interception, that's a bad decision. Or it's not a bad decision. It's just bad execution. But we're not seeing the boneheaded plays, and so that's a plus for me. But overall, I mean, there's more bad from Hurts. But they at the very end of the game, he does step up and they ice the game. So mixed reviews on Hurts, more bad than good. But overall, even on one of his bad games, he doesn't just completely take the Eagles out of it, which was what we've talked about with the high floor. And he didn't run the ball a lot this game, but that mobility gives him kind of a high floor.
Yeah, I mean, this is always what we talked about, and it's those first 3 quarters showed every concern that there is to see about Jalen Hurts, and then that fourth quarter showed everything that there is to be excited about. It's a bad game. It's overall probably a D+ performance from Hurts, maybe even a D performance from Hurts. But even with that, like you said, it still doesn't kill you. We played so bad offensively in a game in 2020 where we played as badly offensively as we did today. We wouldn't have been down 15-6 at halftime. And so I think with a couple minutes left in the second quarter, I thought I had to go to work for something. It ended up getting canceled. Long story short, I was driving. I was trying to get there as halftime ended so I could watch the game in the third quarter. So I ended up having to turn around and come back. But I'm driving and so much is going on and people are complaining. I'm getting stuff sent to my phone. And I'm just thinking, and then Elliot, I'm watching it on my phone. Don't watch games and drive, folks, but I was doing it. And Jake Elliott hits that field goal to go down 15-6 at the end of the half. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm just like, man, from the reaction online and what my friends are saying and what my dad's saying and what everyone's saying, this you wouldn't think it's a 9-point game. And obviously the third quarter, I think there was still even a fumble and a pick, and there was still a lot of problems in the third quarter, but we stayed in shouting distance. We didn't let it bury us. And in last year, in 2020, we would have been buried. This would have been a game we were down 25, 28, 30 points, and there wouldn't have been any opportunity to come back into this game. And also, I mean, we've went a long time talking about the Eagles offense and talking about the Eagles in general. And I don't know if this is an Eagles defense issue or if this is just a Sam Darnold issue, but I think that the people that were crowning Sam Darnold after 3 weeks and calling him fixed might want to revisit that take.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get into the two other things I want to note here real quick on the offense. Jalen Reagor was outsnapped by Quez Watkins for the first time in his career on Sunday. Finally, what we really need now is a wide receiver 3 that can also outsnap Reagor. Reagor is just worthless. He got knocked 6 yards backwards blocking for a screen. How does that ever happen? And it didn't happen once. It happened twice. You want to know why the Eagles' screen game was awful? Jalen Reagor literally jumps out of the way of cornerbacks because he doesn't want to get hit. He dropped a pass. He got flagged for holding. Get the bum off the field. I don't need to see anymore. I would rather see J-Jaw out there running routes than see Jalen Reagor continue to play. At this point, I'm just done. You go back to TCU, and that was an issue with him, there was questions about effort, and it was put on, well, his quarterback was awful his last year at TCU. Well, we're seeing these same issues now play out in his second year in Philadelphia, and I can excuse a lot of things. I can excuse poor route running. I can't excuse poor effort, and that's what we're seeing from Reagor, and I'm sick of it.
Yeah, I mean, even with that Ward pick play, I'd rather see Ward 10 times out of 10 out there right now than Reagor. I mean, Rager's just absolutely providing nothing. And yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised at all. This is not something that I came into this year expecting nothing from Reagor. And I know a lot of people gave me crap for that, but I think it's the only way you could come into this year expecting from him after what we saw last year and more of the same this year. And I have no optimism for him to turn it around.
Yeah, and then a few notes on the offensive line. Jason Kelce with a couple of bad snaps in this game. One leads to a safety. The other one somehow Hurts is able to field and ends up putting the ball in the end zone on that play. But seeing a little bit of inconsistency there with Kelce snapping the ball. Landon Dickerson was pulled from this game, but there wasn't an injury announcement. I know he was kind of struggling. I'm not sure if that was related to that or maybe it's just a minor in-game injury. And then you see that Jordan Mailata, he really struggled at right tackle in this game, I thought. But Andre Dillard played good at left tackle. And so the question becomes, what do? Do you move him back to left tackle and take Dillard off the field? Do you see if he can figure it out at right tackle? It'd be great if Dillard over the course of this season could prove he can be a left tackle and Mailata can make that switch over. You'd have bookend tackles both under the age of 26, but in the short term, I'm not sure what the best move is there.
I'm not an O-line expert. I just want to preface this by saying that, and I want to say that, we paid Jordan Mailata a lot of money. So maybe that's impacting the way I'm watching him and the way I'm reacting to him getting penalties and him getting beat. And he has not blown me away this year when he's been playing. I know he's banged up even before the injury. I was not blown away by Mailata in a way that you were early with Lane Johnson and throughout the years with Lane Johnson and other guys. And I'm not I guess he should kind of be held to that Lane Johnson standard based on the contract he just got given. But I am a little bit concerned about Mailata. Dillard, like you said, I didn't notice anything wrong with Dillard. I didn't see him basically make any mistakes that were noticeable on screen. And that's good to see that he's not a lost cause. Maybe that's not a complete bust. Maybe that's something that just took a little time to get there. We obviously know he can't bounce over to right tackle because we've tried that before and that was a disaster. So I guess it comes down to what happens with Lane. I mean, Lane Johnson's number was on Sirianni's hat. So people are speculating that he could be out for the year or, it's not our job to speculate on, what's going on, whatever. I am curious on if he's going to be back and what that means for what would happen between Dillard and Mailata. And as of right now, I don't really know. I feel like you have to play Mailata based on the contract you just gave him.
Yeah, I mean, if Lane's back, Mailata easily shifts back to left tackle, but it seems like, they're expecting Lane to miss extended time, maybe not the whole year. And so, yeah, I honestly don't know. I'd like to think Mailata can slide over to right tackle. It's where he started his career. And that's a hard switch to make, on a week. So hopefully he can get back to that. And, Stoutland surely can coach him up there. But you wonder if it would be better to put him back at left tackle and bring Driscoll in at right tackle.
Yeah, I think you have to keep Dillard on the field if Lane's not out there just because he's been playing well. Maybe you can trade him. Maybe that becomes a trade piece at some point. So I don't think you're trading Driscoll. So maybe that's a dumb – I don't know. That was my first thought there. But Dillard has been playing well. So I don't know if you could take him off the field until Lane gets back.
Yeah, ultimately, if you get into a situation where they can both only play left tackle, you've got great trade bait for a guy moving forward. So not a bad problem to have. Just need Lane back healthy or Mailata to be able to make that switch.
And that's kind of what happened with Baltimore, right? Baltimore had the two left tackles. They had to move one. They ended up getting a first. So
yeah,
kind of similar.
So let's kick it over to the defense here. You mentioned the defense finally makes some plays. The defensive line wakes up. Fletcher Cox gets a sack and a couple of hits. Hargrave gets a sack, and he almost had another one. He's one sack away from breaking his career high, and we're 5 games into the season. And then Darius Slay comes up with a pair of interceptions, and Steve Nelson comes up with another interception for 3 total in the game. What did you see from the defense in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I have to eat a lot of crow on some of my Darius Slay opinions that have been out there. I mean, what a game from Slay. I mean, first and foremost, stepping up and making 2 picks. Obviously, I think he did have a kid this week. Maybe he had some dad strength out there. And Steven Nelson had the pick that iced it. Even beyond defense, the play of the game is probably that block punt. I mean, that block punt probably sets us up to win. Maybe more than any other play in the game. That's probably the biggest swing and win expectancy at any point in the game. That was a huge block by TJ Edwards. I mean, that's a huge play. And when's the last time we had one? I didn't see even like a stat. I was surprised I didn't see the first time since blank, but it feels like it's been forever since we blocked a punt, or even just in general made a play on special teams, like beyond blocking a punt, a return, forcing a fumble on special teams, a blocked punt, something. It seems like for years our special teams have just been so vanilla and lackluster. So that was really good to see.
Yeah, and Sean Bradley, come on, man. What are you doing falling on that punt? Scoop that thing up and go score. It's not like if you try to scoop it up and you miss it and they fall on it, it's not like they get to keep the ball. It was still 4th down. So scoop that thing up. And he admitted that after the game, that he said his thought was to scoop it up, and that last bounce was weird and he just like fell on it. But yeah, special teams was big in this game too. Elliott's 58-yard field goal heading into halftime kind of gave some momentum too. So special teams really showed up.
Funny story about Sean Bradley while you're on it. I do some work with Fox PHL The Gambler, and he does a show called The Player Show. It's he comes on, Avonte Maddox goes on with some of the Eagles guys that they have there, and that he had to cancel his appearance on Friday's show because they were doing extra work position groups on the defense, like the linebacker group, like they had extra meetings. Each group had extra meetings, and he was like, "I can get out of it if you want me to, like to try to come do the show." And they were like, "No, you guys got to work on it, get that defense right." So I'm happy that the defense called some extra meetings on Friday to turn it around on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. And Mr. Crockpot chimes in and says Rager had a nice return too. He had the 22-yard punt return. So
that's true.
Special teams really stepped up in this game. Jonathan Gannon stepped up in this game. He really mixed up his play calling. We saw Darius Slay following DJ Moore, which is something we haven't seen before. He mixed in some single high looks, some stacked boxes, some blitzes, and the run defense was better. Everything was just worked better on defense, and playing Sam Darnold instead of Patrick Mahomes certainly helps. We'll see how it holds up, on Thursday night, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we saw Davion Taylor get into this game. He took 24 snaps. I didn't actually notice it live. I saw the snap counts later and went back to look at it. So, I mean, Taylor playing and not being noticed is probably a good thing. I mean, he didn't stand out in a bad way, so hopefully he can get on the field more. And Avonte Maddox is quietly having a really good year in the slot. I mean, who knew a 5'7" guy would be a good fit in the slot? Jim Schwartz certainly didn't, but he has a 75.2 passer rating allowed when he's targeted, and he's ranked 41st overall at cornerback by PFF this year. So that was one of my guys I was excited to see heading into this year, in a position that he's actually physically suited to play. And I think Maddox has done really well this year.
Do you think Carolina, I agree with that, by the way. I think Avonte Maddox is perfect for the slot and is playing well in that role. But an unrelated question, do you think Carolina wins this game if Christian McCaffrey played?
I mean, he's got to be worth 3 points, right?
I think he's just got to be worth having a security blanket when they got up big and couldn't move the ball and kept having to punt. I think a couple times there they pick up first downs. I think they probably win that game with McCaffrey.
And I mean, McCaffrey playing takes away a lot of your man looks that the Eagles ran, because we don't have a linebacker or a safety that we can put out there and say cover Christian McCaffrey on passing plays, but we can cover Chuba Hubbard. So, I mean, no knock on Chuba Hubbard, but he's obviously not Christian McCaffrey. I think it's probably a different game, but you can't underestimate Sam Darnold's ability to just tank a game either. So,
for sure. I mean, that game was that's the Sam Darnold experience. I mean, that's what you've seen since USC. I know everyone points to the high school tape. They point to the intangibles. They point to the measurables. They point to everything else except for the fact that the guy likes to throw interceptions, and the guy especially likes to throw interceptions in important moments, like we saw at the end of the game when they still had a chance to go down and score or kick a field goal or whatever it was. And I mean, I was telling everyone after the first 3 weeks in Carolina, take it easy, pump the brakes. Darnold is not playing unbelievable. They're scheming everything really well. He's got good weapons. He has McCaffrey. Joe Brady is a great offensive coordinator, and we saw it as soon as McCaffrey went out. They are a completely different offense. And I said that going into the game, and I think we can say that pretty comfortably coming out of the game after their worst offensive performance of the year. And, yeah, I mean, it will be really interesting to see where Carolina kind of goes for the rest of this year. I mean, this could be a game, not to look too far ahead, if the Eagles do have any hopes of competing for, maybe a last wild card spot. This could be a game that's a tiebreaker over a team like Carolina, who could be an 8-9 win team. So I'm interested to see if this is a game that kind of sends Carolina into a tailspin. But I kind of don't think that'll happen because McCaffrey is coming back, it looks like, this coming week. And like I just said, I think they probably win. They would have won this game with McCaffrey. So I imagine that they'll probably be fine going forward as long as they get him back healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, overall, good game for the defense, struggles for the offense, good game for the special teams, but, the offense is able to ice the game when it comes down to it. And we'll certainly hope that we can get a little better performance from them against Tampa, a defense that has been susceptible. So let's dive into the Eagles and the Bucs. Or do you have anything else you wanted to add before we do that about the Carolina game?
Wait a second. Did we just do an Eagles review without talking about a dumb Derek Barnett play? I didn't notice one.
We did. He didn't have one.
Wow. That's a big step.
It is. And, while we're talking about big steps, Ryan Kerrigan had his first tackle of the year too. So it's just all around great day for the defense, if we're being honest. Here's another one we didn't talk about, but the Eagles had fewer penalties and penalty yards than the Panthers did. So wow. I think it was 6 penalties for 60 yards versus 9 penalties for 69 yards or something like that. And so
we didn't talk about it. Still had a negated touchdown, of course, because Jalen Hurts is going to lead the league in negated touchdowns by far. Dallas Goedert also dropped an easy touchdown. We ended up scoring, so it was fine. But when that happened, I was definitely nervous about with our red zone woes.
Yeah, Mr. Crockpot says, I hope we don't get into the same pattern as years past when the offense would do great and the defense would tank, and vice versa. That's what we've seen the last 2 weeks. Yeah, the good old-fashioned Eagles complementary football that does not exist. And so, against the Chiefs, the offense is on fire. The defense is nowhere to be seen. We flipped that against the Panthers. And so, I guess we can expect the offense to be on point Thursday and the defense to just struggle. Maybe we'll see. So
I think that's fair.
So a little bit of injury report. Yesterday, Derek Barnett did not participate in practice with an ankle injury. Dallas Goedert was held out with an illness that's later been confirmed to be COVID. And so he's extremely unlikely to play. He is vaccinated. He would have to have 2 negative tests 24 hours apart, which is a type to be able to. And then obviously Lane Johnson still held out with that personal issue. Jordan Mailata was limited in practice with a knee injury, but he's expected to play. For the Buccaneers, Levante David did not practice with an ankle injury. Gronk was out with ribs, and their center, Ryan Jensen, out with a hip injury. And then Brady, Godwin, a defensive lineman, Patrick O'Connor, Jason Pierre-Paul, and Antoine Winfield were all limited in practice. And so a lot of injuries there for the Bucs, and that's not including the corners and stuff that they have on IR. And so where do you want to start with this game?
How are we covering Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, and Chris Godwin, and Rob Gronkowski?
Yeah, well, hopefully we're not covering Gronkowski. Hopefully he doesn't play.
Yeah, that's true.
His ribs are miraculously healed on Friday morning. But, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, they're all on pace for 1,000-yard seasons. And so as good as the Eagles' corners played on Sunday, can the Eagles' secondary really slow this team down is a big question.
Yeah, I think we know the answer, personally. I know we're coming off a big game. I know Darius Slay told us not to doubt him. I don't know. I'm going to doubt him, especially because we saw his struggles with big receivers last year, and Mike Evans is coming to town. By the way, don't know, this is just a random aside. Is Mike Evans a Hall of Famer? Do you, just top of your head, do you think he's a Hall of Famer?
Yes.
You look at his numbers. It's pretty remarkably consistent. And if he continues at a similar pace, he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. Anyway, Mike Evans, specifically for this matchup, I think he's gonna have a huge day. We saw Antonio. It seems like they're kind of, and it was the same way last year. Game to game, it seems like Brady really does key in on one guy. We saw in week 1 against Dallas that was Gronk. We saw in last week that was Antonio Brown. We saw in another week that it was Chris Godwin, and then we saw last. It's kind of been Mike Evans has been the second guy behind whoever the main target has been in a lot of these games. I think this is the game where Mike Evans is the guy that they're really keying in on, because I just don't see how we can contest catches against Mike Evans. If you're throwing things up, and Brady doesn't do a ton of that, but I think Mike Evans is going to have a huge day with a ton of targets and multiple touchdowns. And you hope that Avonte Maddox can, like we just said, he's doing a good job in the slot. I imagine he'll be, pairing up against Godwin and AB on and off. You have to hope that he does a good job against whoever's in the slot. I think Evans is a nightmare for us, and I think if Gronkowski were to play, that's a complete nightmare for us, especially in the red zone. So those are the two biggest kind of fears I have going into this game. So I will say, I don't know, I guess, what the update is on Gronk, and if there's any, is he 50-50? Is he trending towards not playing? I'm not quite sure. But that seems like it's actually a pretty important injury to me.
Yeah, for sure. Mr. Crockpot says, no question, the Eagles will have to get at least a couple turnovers versus Brady, which is easier said than done. I think you look at a mismatch with the offense versus our secondary like that. I think maybe we need to get back to that too high. Don't give up the big play. Make them go on 15-play drives. But nobody is better at surgically executing that type of an offense than Brady. And so, I'd like to see the Eagles, continue to mix coverages, play some man, and just see what they can do. I don't think you can blitz Brady a lot. He's very adept at beating the blitz, but I don't think you want to just sit back too high and give up those underneath things. You want to make him go through reads, and it needs to be a big day for the defensive line. The word on Brady for years has been that he's susceptible to pressure up the middle. I mean, what quarterback isn't? But it's like that's the only weakness we can find for Brady, so we just say it.
It's
the Bucs have a good offensive line, but if Jensen doesn't play at center, there's certainly some opportunities for Cox and Hargrave to push the middle of the pocket. Brady's not the most mobile guy. He's great with his footwork in the pocket, but there's nowhere to move. There's nowhere to maneuver if you've got pressure coming off the edge, but the in pocket's collapsing. And so I think a huge key to this game for the defense is going to be for Cox and Hargrave to collapse that pocket on Brady, and for Gannon just to throw the kitchen sink at him. Not necessarily in terms of blitzing, but just in disguising coverages. We saw Josh Sweat drop into coverage on a couple of plays. Just anything you can do to try to make him hesitate. It's time to get home.
Like you said, we've been saying it for years about Brady, where it's you have to get pressure up his face. You have to get pressure with your D tackles and up the middle. And it's like the whole Alabama, you have to have a mobile quarterback to beat Alabama thing. The whole Alabama struggles with mobile quarterbacks. When you find that one chink in the armor for these amazing coaches or players, coach in Saban's case, player in Brady's case, you hammer that home. But it's true. I mean, you look at the Rams game. They struggled in that Rams game, and Aaron Donald was getting pressure up the middle. Now, Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox are not Aaron Donald, but you look across the league, they're about as close as you'll find. I mean, there's not many D tackles that at least are playing better than Javon Hargrave or are considered on a higher tier than Fletcher Cox. So we technically do have the pieces to execute a plan against Brady up the middle, rushing him in terms of not having to blitz. It's just the secondary to me, not to harp on the same exact thing over and over. I just don't see how we can, hold Evans and hold Godwin and hold Brown all quiet. I could see this being a game where the Buccaneers do this a lot, and they did it a lot more last year, where it's 20-17 in the third quarter. They go up 27-17. We kick a field goal to go down 27-20, and then they just score like two straight times, and the game ends up being 41-20, and it looks like it wasn't close, but it kind of was the whole game. But they toyed around with us. I could see us hanging around, and then kind of getting blown out at the end, and it kind of a little bit like the Chiefs game. I know we did end up scoring a garbage time touchdown, but it could be a little bit like that Chiefs game where we do hang around.
And for all the people out there that are not pleased with the run-pass ratio, this is not the week that's going to correct itself. This is not going to be a run-heavy against a Bucs interior line that features Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh. You're just not going to see it. This is going to have to be a Jalen Hurts game. It has to be receivers exploiting this makeshift secondary, which there's opportunity there. This is a secondary reeling from injuries. They went out and signed Richard Sherman, who did not play much last year, had an injury. He looks old. He doesn't look like himself. It's not often, it feels weird to say that Richard Sherman is a weakness that you can exploit. But it's certainly the case coming up on this Thursday night. The Eagles are going to have a chance to beat Sherman, and they're going to have to connect on those opportunities.
Yeah, and not that he'd be going against Sherman, but losing Goddard probably for this game is a big loss. I mean, he's someone who we did not use enough this week, and I feel like we're not using enough in general, and I would like to see him used more, especially in the red zone. And we're not going to have that this week probably. Ertz is going to have to step up, and I'm actually, we didn't touch on Ertz in the review, but we'll touch on him right now. 1 catch on 6 targets last week and had a huge drop where I know it wasn't a perfect ball by Hurts, but if Ertz isn't providing you yak and Ertz isn't providing you a lot anymore, he's not providing you blocking. If he can't catch a tough ball here and there to get a first down on an important third down, then what's he really here for? I mean, what's he getting paid for if he can't make that play? So 1 catch on 6 targets is not going to cut it from Zach Ertz, especially with Dallas Goedert out of this game probably. So we're going to need a performer. I know you're not a big Ertz guy. I've been really low on what I've seen from Ertz this year, but he's going to have to step up and play well in this game, I think.
And he's got a chance that, he's going to have a chance for a big day with Goddard out, Levante David's out, and Antoine Winfield is still in the concussion protocol. And so this is a good matchup for the Eagles. Now, obviously, Goddard going out really hurts that matchup, but Ertz is going to have a chance to make some plays. And Mr. Crockpot agrees with you that he should have caught that ball. And that's what he's brought here to do, is to make those catches. Just something else about the run defense. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are allowing nearly 100 yards less on the ground per game than the Eagles. Think about that. The Eagles are allowing 152 yards per game on the ground. The Buccaneers are allowing 45. The second best run defense is allowing 30 more yards per game than the Bucs, almost double the rushing yardage. So, you're not running on this defense. If you do run on this defense, it will be Jalen Hurts, scrambling out of structure. It's not going to be a pound the ball sort of game, especially with our makeshift offensive line. And that puts a lot of pressure on that offensive line. When the run game is totally off the table, all of a sudden you've got this makeshift offensive line, and they've got to hold up against a really good Bucs pass rush. And so I think, you want to be able to hit those quick hitters, not for the love of the football gods, no more screens. But you've got to be able to hit these quick hitters, get the ball out of Hurts' hand to kind of neutralize that pass rush, and then pick and choose your spots that you want to take shots down the field against the secondary.
Yeah, they're going to have to take shots down the field. It's absolutely true. And I know that we've had a couple that have converted and then get taken off the board. They're going to have to convert on some, and that's the only way that you can compete in this game. And, I don't know how optimistic you're feeling. I'm actually surprised at this line. I haven't seen where this line. I'm going to check while I'm talking. I think it's around 6.5 where it was. I don't know if that's been bet up or bet down. It actually surprised me that this line wasn't higher. This was the line I expected. I know it's in Philadelphia. It's at 7 now. I expected Tampa to be favored by 8.5, maybe 9, and you're seeing only 7. I don't know if that's maybe Vegas giving the Eagles some respect. I know last week going into Carolina, we were only a 3-point underdog where it closed. So maybe Vegas thinks the Eagles are a little scrappy. Maybe they think we can hang around in this game. If I was not an Eagles fan, I would probably be hammering Tampa to cover that spread.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Crockpot says, I'd love to know what the record for touchdowns taken away.
We already have it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we probably already have it just 5 games into the year, but honestly, I have no idea where to even look for that stat. That would be interesting.
Someone will tweet it out at some point. Someone has to.
Yeah. I mean, it ultimately comes down to, if Goddard was going to play, I would feel better about this game, especially assuming Winfield doesn't clear concussion protocol, assuming Gronk doesn't play. But those are some big ifs. The Bucs are a better team at their current health than the Eagles are, and the Bucs are a lot more likely to get players back between now and Thursday than the Eagles. And so It's hard to feel good about this game in terms of a win. But I still think, there's some positive things I'm looking to take away from this game, some growth to see. But I don't feel confident about the Eagles winning this game off the short week against the Bucs.
Neither do I. And now at least you get this short week. You play on Thursday. Hopefully, like you said, we have some positives to take away, even if it is what it probably will be, a loss. You get some positives. You build that into having some extra time to prepare for now the head coachless Las Vegas Raiders, who we get after that. They're not on a short week. We are. We're on a long week. We have extra rest, I meant to say. And so I think that's going to be an interesting game. And that's a game that I feel like we should be able to win now. I mean, you watch how the Raiders have played these last 2 weeks, and you watch obviously everything that's going on. We'll see how they respond in Denver on Sunday. But I'm feeling pretty good about our chance to maybe escape this first 7 weeks of our schedule, which when we all preseason were looking at the schedule, you look at the first 6-7 weeks and you would have been happy with 3-4. And it looks like that's possible. If you lose to the Bucs and then you beat the Raiders and you're 3-4 coming out of that tough schedule, that is way better than I expected to be. And, way better than we thought we were going to be after that Dallas game, or maybe even after that KC game.
Yeah. We sat here on the podcast last week and we said that the Eagles needed to win one of those 3 games just to have the shot, to keep those wild card hopes alive. Well, they won against the Panthers. And neither one of us thinks they're super likely to win against the Bucs, but the Raiders game looks very winnable now. Like you mentioned, a lot of chaos there, and coming off a long week against a Raiders team that was kind of struggling before. And so, even if the Eagles lose, if they can put together some positive signs, you'd have to feel good about where they're at heading into the Raiders game and starting to get into, as part of the schedule that will be a little more manageable than what they opened the year with.
I mean, you lose this game to Tampa, and then you go beat the Raiders, and then you go do what you should do and beat the Detroit Lions. You're 4-4. You're a 500 team, and you're moving forward with a pretty easy schedule with a lot of NFC East games. And moving back to the Bucs just a little bit, I think a lot of people are getting excited about what's new in the NFL right now. I think a lot of people are excited about Matthew Stafford on the Rams. I am too. I actually think they're the best team in football, maybe. I think a lot of people are getting excited about how the Cardinals look, how the Cowboys look, how the Bills look, what these new contenders or these young contenders. I think a lot of people are forgetting about Tampa and how good Tampa is. Maybe that's because they haven't played. Maybe it's because they played Miami this week, so they were out of the spotlight after being in the spotlight, and they didn't play that well against New England. I still think you look at this Tampa Bay roster, it's hard to talk yourself into a win if you're anybody, not just the Eagles. I think this roster is still just absolutely ridiculous, and even going to the other side of that Super Bowl, I think Kansas City is going to be just fine. We'll talk about that on Friday more. I think a lot of people are getting a little bit too excited about what's new instead of maybe this was better for final thoughts. And maybe the Chargers are in there too. And the Chargers are a really good team. And they're a team I picked to go 11-5 when we did our preseason picks. I picked them to go to the playoffs, and they're 11-6, 12-5, whatever it was. And they look every bit as impressive as you could have hoped, especially not having a home field. Really, they're playing all these games with a half full Browns stadium. Not to do a whole review of Week 5, but I think that people are kind of forgetting about these teams that have been good year after year, or at least these 2 Super Bowl teams from last year. And I've seen a little bit too much optimism from Eagles fans, honestly, about this game. Maybe that's what I'm pushing back against. And Tampa's not as good this year. And I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I mean, if the Eagles make this if the Eagles fight this out, they lose a 1-possession game sort of thing, I'm going to sit on the review show next week and I'm going to feel pretty good about it. I want them to come out. I want them to be competitive. I want to see the defense mix some things up again, and I want to see Hurts play well. But at the end of the day, I'm not expecting a win here. I think the Bucs, I think they're a very good team. I think they've got some exploitable weaknesses, particularly in their secondary and up the middle of their defense with the injuries at linebacker and safety if they end up not playing. And, maybe the Eagles can get into a dogfight here with them, but I do think the Eagles will have to put up a lot of points to be able to keep pace with this offense.
Do you remember what happened the last time Tom Brady was on Thursday Night Football?
I don't. What was it?
he forgot how many downs there were and lost to Nick Foles last year and the Chicago Bears. I believe as a 7-point favorite on the road. So,
I think the Eagles have the longest active streak of Thursday night wins too. I think
really
somewhere in the NFL. Yeah, I think they've won like 7 in a row.
Wow,
8-Ball chimes in on YouTube and says the RPO does not work if they don't run the ball. When will Nick understand that? Nick needs to change his offensive playbook. I don't really agree with that. The whole point of the RPO is to take what the defense gives you, and if what the defense is giving you is those throws behind it, you got to take it. Now, that said, the RPO execution by Hurts, this is not a play calling thing. This is a Hurts thing. Hurts has been bad executing the RPO. A lot of people have ridden Andre Dillard for these illegal man downfield, but that's a quarterback penalty. When you are calling an RPO, your offensive line is run blocking. And so if you're throwing that ball, you've got to get it out fast. And that's not something he's done. And so I don't disagree that, the RPOs, maybe we need to scale that back or get rid of that. But it's not that they're not working because we don't run the ball. I think those are not working because of execution on Jalen Hurts' part.
To me, and you'll hear me say this a lot about scheme and stuff like that and play calling. I think a lot of it's semantics. Like I think us saying that we don't want to do an RPO. What we're saying instead is if we're calling a pass play and the defense is showing that we should run, we want to do a whole audible and run the ball. And instead, if the defense is showing pass, we just want to call a pass play and pass the ball. To me, it's the same result either way. Like obviously, like you said, what's important is Jalen making the right decision and Jalen reading the defense correctly and Jalen either taking the ball for himself, running the ball, or throwing the ball quickly when it's an RPO situation. If we want to talk about the execution of the RPOs, that's fine for me. But beyond that, I mean, if we're talking about whether we should be running them, whether we shouldn't be running them, whether we should just be throwing the ball instead of throwing the ball in an RPO, a slant's a slant. Like if it's an RPO or not, like I don't really care. I don't know. Maybe that's a dumb brain take. Maybe that's a simple-minded take. But to me, I think it's all semantics.
And I mean, you could argue that the Eagles should have run the ball more against the Panthers with Hurts struggling. But at the same token, until the last drive, the running game wasn't doing anything. Miles rips off a couple of runs, goes out of bounds on him, but on that last drive and boosts his yards per carry. But he was not hitting the holes. He wasn't making the right reads early in the game, and the running game just wasn't going. And so, it's kind of between a rock and a hard place. It's hard to run behind that offensive line, as well as, we feel like they're playing with 4 backups and 2 of them playing out of position as is. It's hard to run behind that. It's a lot easier to call a pass play and let your mobile quarterback evade the pressure that comes. And so I think a combination of that inexperienced offensive line and the fact that we're just playing a tremendous run defense, you're not going to see very much running on Thursday night.
Yeah, I agree with that. I expect a ton of passing, and I want them to pass the ball a ton. I mean, that's the way you attack this defense. And if we can attack that defense that way, I mean, we're not going to win the game anyway. So let's see what happens. Let's let Hurts air it out. Let's target Smith an absolute ton. Let's get Quez involved. Let's get Gainwell involved. I want to see some Gainwell this week. I want to see a lot of Gainwell.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that about wraps it up here for this Eagles preview show. Remember, a little bit of a different format this week with the Eagles on the short week. We'll be back on Friday to review the rest of the NFL Week 5 and preview Week 6. But before we get out of here, Mark, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, my final thoughts are on fantasy basketball. I have my fantasy basketball draft tonight. Everyone out there that is a football fan that, like me, when October rolls around, it's like, oh my God, basketball starts in a week. I am currently freaking out about the amount of sports that I'm going to have to consume over the next 2 to 3 weeks, whether that be with the Sixers, with playoff baseball going on. And then obviously I'm not, football's king for me. So you got Saturdays for college, you got Sundays for NFL. I am excited for the sports that are coming, but I'm also kind of dreading having to watch the amount of sports I'm going to have to watch and talk about. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm freaking out about, content basically.
Yeah. It's that perfect part of the year for people that are into all the sports where all the sports are happening. But
yeah,
for me, it's just all football all the time. So for my final thought, I just want to pour one out for Spencer Rattler. We've had a lot of discussion about Spencer Rattler on this podcast, going all the way back to week 1, where I said I just don't see it. He's careless with the football, and Mark thought I might be just a little bit too hard on my guy. And Spencer Rattler gets benched in the second quarter of the OU Texas game, and it's this sinking feeling as a quarterback. You see your backup come in, and you're like, maybe he'll do something stupid, and I get back in. And then his first play, he gets a 66-yard touchdown, and just all over from there. So, but this particular tweet I wanted to show out, it's Spencer Rattler's draft stock this season. Somebody tweeted this out, and I thought it was hilarious. So here you go. Coming into the season, he's QB1, expected to go number 1 overall. It's a little bit of a bumpy takeoff, and then the Texas game happens. And so, but for real, I mean, that's got to suck. Life comes at you fast. You come into the season expected to be the number 1 pick, and 6 games into the year, you're not even the starter for your team anymore. And I don't ever remember that rapid of a fall from grace. I mean, I know you've got I think it was Matt Barkley going back for his senior year at USC, cost himself a lot of money. Sean Wade last year at Ohio State, but he was never in the conversation as the number 1 overall pick. So interested to see how OU handles that. And, I fully expect at this point Rattler probably to enter the transfer portal. And I think he'll be back in college again next season. I don't think you go pro after this.
I was going to ask that, and yeah, I agree completely. He has to stay in college. I imagine he'll go to, one of the quarterback whisperers. He'll go to Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin maybe, or he'll go to Florida I think Florida actually has a young, exciting guy, maybe Georgia. He'll go to an exciting team that thinks he's the missing piece, and I don't think he is. I think Rattler's not the guy. I think he's kind of like a high school creation in a lot of ways that we've seen other guys. Sam Darnold in his own way. A lot of guys are high school creations. Maybe it's because he was on that show. I'm not quite sure. He did show different traits last year. He's not the same quarterback he even was last year. But Caleb Williams, that guy was electric. Oh man.
I said after the Eastern Carolina game, when I saw him get in the fourth quarter, he was the best quarterback on the team, and it didn't take long for him to show that when he got the chance. So yeah, I think Rattler transfers. I think he's got to come back next year. And honestly, just anybody that looked at this year's quarterback class and thought we're going to get one next year, they've got to be sweating it out, because the quarterback class has definitely fallen off. And I know there's some guys that we're excited about, but the luster it's definitely lost a little bit of its luster over the last several weeks.
So I've been in this is more of like a college football conversation, I guess. I've been a little down on Oklahoma to start this year. I do my rankings every Monday, putting them out, and it's been hard for me to talk myself into Oklahoma as a title contender because these low-scoring, close games. I mean, I guess you could say that the defense has stepped up in these games, but their offense hasn't against inferior opponents. So maybe that's a positive. But with Caleb Williams and with the remaining schedule that Oklahoma has, it looks like this is going to be a 13-0 team that goes to the college football playoffs. So I'm really curious to see what they do. Big Cat from Barstool made a really good point where Lincoln Riley has to play a game now where he kind of has to act like Rattler's going to play, or kind of has to involve him a little bit. Maybe, I don't know what he's saying to the media, but if he doesn't and he comes out and says Caleb Williams is a starter, I imagine Rattler will be in the transfer portal today or on the moment Riley says that. So I'm curious to see, and we saw it with Penn State this weekend. You need a backup quarterback, not just in the NFL, but in college. I'm curious to see if Oklahoma, and maybe they have another guy. I wouldn't know as well as you do if they have a third guy who could be a good backup. But Spencer Rattler would be obviously an excellent backup to have there if they get into a college football playoff game and Caleb Williams can't play well or gets hurt or whatever that is. That's going to be important for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I don't know much about QB3. I know they had Trevor Mordecai, who transferred last year to SMU, and he's playing pretty well. But yeah, you definitely don't want to get down to that third string option. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how it plays out, and interested to, more for the purposes of this podcast to see how it impacts draft evaluations later in the spring.
Malik Willis and Carson Strong, baby. Those are my two guys. Especially Carson Strong. That guy just He's got a lot of Josh Allen in his game, in my opinion. I'm starting to get there. Probably a less athletic Josh Allen. So if that doesn't excite you to watch Nevada football, I don't know what will.
All right. Well, that's going to about do it here. Thank you for joining us for episode 16 of Chalk Talk. This was an all Eagles episode. And again, we'll be back with episode 17 on Friday to catch up on the rest of the NFL action. If you enjoy what you heard on the show here, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter. I'm at _TPL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. From me, from Mark, from the Painted Lines, we will see you guys next time.